Welcome, everybody, to Navigate CX with Altudo. I am Matthew McQueenie. So pleased once again to be joined by DSF David San Filippo. David has a forthcoming article coming out about, or blog, if we will, about GEO, Generative Experience Optimization, and how it can interplay with Sitecore Search. We're going to get into what you found there, David, but let's start at the beginning. What is GEO? Can you give us a little primer on that?
Sure. So you may have noticed when you search Google, Google will actually generate results, generate an answer or an explanation based on the search results. That's called a generative summary. You also see lots of engines or LLMs like ChatGPT and Perplexity. People will go there instead of search engines, and they'll get results, and those results are based on search results. So this whole concept of GEO is how do you optimize your website so that you appear in those and you're referenced in those? Because we've actually seen drops in traffic of content-heavy sites. There's a study by Bain, and they actually showed that 80% of users won't click any search results on Google 40% of the time. So this is something that a lot of people, especially people who leverage content strategy, are trying to think through. How do you rank for these generative summaries? And there are tons of techniques. A popular one, though, has been putting together FAQ content. And there's even structured data for FAQs that make it easier for crawlers to get that content and make that available for LLMs and for those algorithms so that they can actually produce valuable results.
So GEO obviously kind of comes off of our old friend SEO
Yes.
in the acronym there. Just from a overall standpoint, how different are the tactics you might do for SEO for GEO?
So, I mean, first off, SEO isn't dead. There's still a need to prepare your content and index it for Google, because people do still click. But I think for me, GEO is really about thinking about how these bots and how these LLMs will interpret your content, right? So that's why, like what I was saying before, having FAQ content, having a content strategy that produces content that is going to make sense to those engines is really important, and thinking through strategies for doing that.
And so at Altudo, FAQs then become a very important strategy in
Yes.
general, right? FAQ pages, even if they're not out there on the homepage, but just almost having them as an indexable, GEO friendly content type.
Absolutely. Like having your content in a way where it's easily interpreted will raise the chances of something like a chat GPT or of your content being surfaced in that generative summary.
And I think one thing that we've seen, uh, there was this thought that maybe AI would destroy so many things, including the handy dandy DXP or CMS. But in some ways, what you're saying is that the DXP CMS, potentially what we're going to get into with search, is a mechanism that helps GEO.
Yeah, well, I think the thing to think about is just like you think about content strategy and you think about content and how your visitors and the people, your customers are going to interpret that content. You also have to think at how these LLMs will interpret your content, because they're just as important, because they're going to be a new interface to get at your content, right? So if you think through that and you give it content that it could reuse so that when someone asks a question to it, it has enough that it could kind of reference your content. You're putting yourselves at the top of the line for that type of traffic.
Yes, the arms race.
Yes.
Um, Now we're going to start to bridge the gap here to the other piece of this. Um, you found a little something in Sitecore Search, which could be a really useful tool to getting to these kinds of FAQs. But first, before we get there, give us a little background on Sitecore Search itself.
Sure. So Sitecore Search is a SaaS search platform. It was actually a new platform that was built as a branch of the Discover, which was actually an acquisition Sitecore made a few years ago when they bought Reflection. This was more of a product search driven uh, solution. It was really for commerce sites wanting to kind of optimize their search results for products. But Sitecore took that core search technology and they extended it to content. And Sitecore Search kind of became that, and now it's like it's the product that does everything as far as making search available. It became especially important when XM Cloud became kind of the default way that we build sites because you need a composable search solution to pair with it because it doesn't give you the old Solar implementation that XM and XP users. So it will basically be a standalone search solution that will index the content on your website, and it gives you the components that enable you to create search experiences on your site. Now, the fact that it knows about all of your content, the fact that it has a recommendations engine, gives it a good starting point to enter this discussion. And they actually recently, probably a few months ago, introduced a feature called Generative Answers. And this was meant really to be very similar to what you see with Google generative summaries, so that if you search for something like what is Content Hub on Sitecore Search's website, it'll actually show you an answer to that is a generative summary, right? So the light bulb moment that came to me is I could use those same generative summaries to power FAQs, because what Sitecore Search actually does is it looks at all of your content and it generates questions and answers based on the content that you have. And there's a place in the Search Console that shows it all in one place, and you can actually edit it. So I basically took that and connected it to this GEO problem to enable you to create very easy to maintain FAQs that also produce the schema markup for FAQs, so that your search engines can index it and make that available to help improve your GEO rankings.
That's amazing. So would you be able to show us this?
Yeah, let me show you
Now,
a couple of things.
now, as you're showing it, I wanted to ask one question. When you talked about the generative, let me allow you here to show. When you talked about the generative function that Sitecore Search already brings out there, is that something that's just on top of the search, whereas you're actually taking all of those results and creating a new page out of it? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm basically taking advantage of the AI capabilities of Sitecore Search to generate these generative questions and answers. So just to show you the intent really here was to power a richer search experience, because people are going more and more, they're getting used to LLMs, so they're typing questions into search boxes these days. So this is actually Sitecore's website. So if you type a question like what is Content Hub, you get this little question and answer returned at the top. So this is what that feature was intended. But under the covers, there's actually a place in Sitecore Search where you can look to see all the questions and answers that were generated across all the content in the index. There are hundreds of these. This is just a search for the term experience, but we have a ton of content and we have a ton of question and answers. So a marketer can come in here, like if they don't like the generative answer, they can come in here and they can edit the question, they can edit the answer. So you have complete control over this and how this appears. But the fact that it is doing this automatically based on your existing content just saves so much time and not having to worry about how do I even create these things that make these snippets of content that can be indexed for these search engines, right? So this just saves a ton of time as a starting point, right? And then we can actually leverage the SDK. Sorry, the thing on the top was hiding. And there's actually a JavaScript SDK for Sitecore Search, and this is kind of the default page on it, but I've created this custom FAQ page here. And you can have multiple FAQ pages, and you probably want to have different ones based on the different terms that you'd want to go support, right? And all this is doing is saying, give me all the questions and answers that I set up for that term, right? And you could see very simple interface accordions here. And this makes it somewhat useful for visitors, but the real power is I'm also storing structured data here. So if I actually inspect my last entry, and I'll drag this over. This is just Google Chrome DevTools, right?
Yeah.
And here at the end, we can see the script and this application LD JSON. This is structured data. So this is that same content in that format, which is just very easy to consume by web crawlers and the same web crawlers that use these things. So this is kind of like a turnkey solution to generating fact content based on the content you already have on the site. It's always going to be evergreen because as you add more content, it's just going to generate more stuff, right? So your FAQ pages will always be up to date. And you have the power to kind of edit the content in them as well. So just this one feature just made it very easy to turn this whole thing into a GEO solution.
Yeah, it's like a GEO repurpose of a tool you have already. So this was used for one search-based use case, but you have all of these things available in a back end that you can then, or the console that you can then bring onto a page, make an FAQ page. You can step in and intervene to make fixes, but it's also updating on its own. Like, what would be the threshold for which a new question might show up? Could it just be like if a new blog comes out today, maybe there's a new question that surfaces from it? I know this is all like day one.
That's exactly how it works, though. Like
Yeah.
as you publish new content, it gets indexed by Sitecore Search. There's a separate process within Sitecore Search that looks at that to generate questions and answers. I'm not sure the cadence on how often it does it, but I would assume at some point it would generate a new one, and that would be returned the next time you serve that page.
Wow. Well, that's really cool. And I think this is the kind of thinking you want to have, right? As you're looking for how to get the most out of a solution, and just how we can bring that to life in a way that, hey, it's there to help users originally, to help users find things in a site, and now you can turn it on its head to help generative engines find the content in the way that users can then find it in those domains.
Absolutely. And this is not something that takes a lot of effort to put on somebody's site. Like I made some modifications. The schema markup was custom, but all the pieces to even generate the UI for this were built into the SDK. So this is something I'm fairly confident I can get up and running with the client in probably a couple of days of work.
Yeah, it almost seems like a no-brainer if you have Sitecore Search. And I know, David, your plug, you'd be happy to field any questions on this directly.
Absolutely.
Anyone on our team would. Uh, just contact us, contact you. Thank you for taking the time to show us this. Really cool, innovative, and we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt.